Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Well, the rain has let up a little bit so that you can hear my voice over it. Hopefully it'll stay down long enough for us to get a little ways further in this Go Show on chanting. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Helps grow the Sangha. Okay? That's Bodhisattva work, so thank you for that. Concerning the ways of the ordinary world, Nichiren continues, though a man may not be inclined to a certain act, if he is urged to do it by his parents, his sovereign, his teachers, his wife and children, right, our influences, or his close friends, and if he is a person of conscience, he will overlook his own inclinations and will sacrifice his name and profit and even his life to perform that act. Right? You don't think so? You remember being a teenager in love? What you would have thrown away of absolutely no value? Everything you owned just to be able to declare your love to your significant other, yeah? This is what humans do. We're emotional creatures. This is why influence is so important, to make sure that influence is of value. And if our pursuit is of enlightenment, there is no higher value, right? What could there be? So, of course, this is the appropriate influence. Now, when we put our influence into the world, there's an example in here, and I think he may say it again. He talks about like an echo. Let's see if he says it again here. How much more earnest will he be, then, if the act is something that springs from his own heart? In such a case, even the restraints of his parents, his sovereign, or his teachers cannot prevent him from carrying out the action. Thus it was that the worthy man Fan Yu Shi cut off his own head so that it could be presented to King Ko of Chicha, having pledged to present his sword to the Lord of Su, hung it on the Lord's grave. These are old folklores from China he's quoting, right? The example of the echo that he gave earlier, please understand, really understand, because it's easy to read that and say, when we invoke the Daimoku, right, that like an echo, it comes right back to us. And that sounds like, or is easily interpreted as, I make a plea, and from somewhere comes the answer. But that would be religious thinking. That's magical thinking. That's not Buddhism. Think about what an echo is. An echo does not exist in of itself, right? An echo isn't waiting out there in the hills to come to you once it hears you call for it. That's not how echoes work. Echoes are reflections of the cause, the effort, the action you take. It may come in a delayed fashion, but it did not construct itself of its own accord. It is a response to one's own invocation. And this is what Daimoku is. It is, I am Buddha. I'm calling that nature inherent in my mind to now take over, be in control, instantiate, over and above any other mentations. You see? Makes sense? The Daimoku is an invocation of an inherent ability. It's not a prayer. It's not a plea, right? That's why it's not a desire. because desires are cravings for something outside our sentient mind, our existence, our moment-to-moment instantiation. Similarly, at the gathering on Eagle Peak, the Dragon King's daughter attained Buddhahood in her present form. Now, if you read old translations of the Lotus Sutra, it doesn't read that way. Remember when I did the Lotus lectures, I read some of H. Kern's translation from the late 1800s? And he included in his translation that she very briefly turned into a man and then awakened her Buddha nature. But that's just identifying the process within the folklore so people would accept her attainment of Buddhahood, because even in his day, 3,000 years ago, what Indian, culturally raised Indian forms of Hinduism and all their myriad gods would have said, oh, a woman can be enlightened, is simply not acceptable. Our culture will not allow a woman to be on the same playing field as a man. Now I know you're full of baloney, right? No matter how much they studied, that's so inculcated in their culture that they had to slip in, she turned in for a man so she could attain enlightenment. Oh, wow, that's amazing. Oh, that you can take. That's why it's called expedient means, because it's not fact for fact actuality. This is describing an understanding for the sentient mind. And if it can be realized in the sentient mind, then it is real. It's really that simple. In the Hinayana Sutras, women were despised because they are hindered by the thick clouds of the 5 obstacles and bound by the strong cords of the 3 obediences. And in the Mahayana Sutras, expounded in the first 40 years and more years of the Buddha's preaching, women were rejected since they were thought to be incapable of carrying out practices, assiduous practices, it says religious here, wrong, assiduous practices over many kalpas. Or, though it had been stated that, quote, the first time they conceive the desire to do so, they can attain enlightenment, end quote, this was indicated as a possibility in name only, with no actual examples to support it. Yes, dear, you could become a Buddha one day. Oh, women, right? So in effect, the attainment of Buddhahood by women was denied. So Nichiren is making a very specific point here, as I did earlier. Thus, even a woman who was in the realm of human or heavenly beings had no hope of ever finding the way to become a Buddha or to realize her Buddha-ness, her suchness of Buddha. How much less hope was there for this woman described in the Lotus Sutra, a humble being born among the creatures known as dragons, who had not yet reached maturity but was only 8 years old. And yet, contrary to all expectations, through the instructions of Manjusri, in the short space of time between the teacher of the law and the Devadatta chapters, when the Buddha was preaching the Treasure Tower chapter, she attained Buddhahood in the midst of the ocean. This was a most wonderful happening, an auspicious, another one of those drop the mic moments, yeah? If it had not been for the power of the Lotus Sutra, the Myoho Renge Kyo, the invocation of Buddha-ness, the foremost among all the teachings of the Buddha's lifetime, how could such a thing have come about? Right? There is no other sutra that provides for this occurrence, this story, this, quote, proof, right? It's nowhere else. Therefore, Miao Lo remarks, of the event. Quote, the sutra here demonstrates its power by revealing that practice is shallow, but the benefit that results is profound indeed. Now, don't misread that as the shallow meaning that the practice doesn't mean much. No, exactly the opposite. It's the act of chanting is pretty damn simple. It's almost ridiculously simple. And this is why Nichiren keeps reminding us, it's not magic words. It's not that you're going to chant Namo Myo Rengekyo and suddenly everything is glorious. Attitude and intent. With your corrected attitude over time, learning. Look, it took me over 40 years to really, really get this. It takes time. You get little chunks of it along the way, but when you really sense it in your moment-to-moment life, current momentum, when you really experience your Buddha-ness, then you can know and have deep, profound confidence because you know that you need to invoke it. Look, you can have car keys, but until you get in the car, start the car, and drive it down the road, you can't appreciate what the car can do for you. But you can run around showing everyone the keys all day long. That's what it looks like. It's that simple. Just turn the key and vroom, you're off. Man, there's a lot more going on there, yeah? So the daimoku, the practice, seems rather simplistic, shallow, if you will. But it's not the chanting of the daimoku itself alone that provides for your awakening. It is your understanding of the profundity of what you're invoking, your commitment to Buddha-ness, right? You want this ultimate, the vehicle, car, whatever. You have to get into it, start it, give it fuel, maintain it, learn how to drive it expertly. Well, this is Buddhism. That is the practice, not simply chanting. Chanting is the invocation of getting our vehicle moving in concert with life. And because the dragon girl was able to attain Buddhahood through this sutra, how could she ever abandon someone who is a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra? Because she's convinced, she knows now. She has the confidence, she has the attitude and the intent. Even if she had not been admonished against it by the Buddha. Therefore, in the verse that she uttered in praise of the Buddha, she stated, quote, I unfold the doctrines of the great vehicle to rescue living beings from suffering, end quote. And there it is in a capsule. Our practice includes our bodhisattva activity. The only place we can do that in time-space is in this human lifetime. Right? With a sentient mind, we can perceive the engine of life for as long as we have a sentient mind. So make use of it. Get with the program, yeah? Her oath was the oath taken by her retinue, or all the creatures known as dragons, whose number is so vast that, quote, the mouth cannot express it, the mind cannot fathom it, end quote. The Dragon King's daughter, the Dragon King Sagara, though a lowly creature, cared profoundly for his daughter. Therefore, he took the finest treasure in all the great ocean, a wish-granting jewel, and had his daughter present it as alms to the Buddha. In recognition of the fact that she had attained Buddhahood in her present form. This jewel was equivalent in value to a major world system. Okay. Not impressed. The impressive thing is that this 8-year-old girl became Buddha, achieved Buddha-ness. How amazing. Devadatta, he was the grandson of King Simahanu. Simahanu, yeah, the son of Shakyamuni Buddha's uncle, King Dronodana, and an elder brother of the Venerable Ananda. His mother was a daughter of the rich man Suprabuddha. He was thus a member of the family of a wheel-turning king and held a high social position in the southern continent of Jambudvipa. Part of the Brahmin caste, no doubt. While he was still an ordinary member of society, the woman he had intended to marry, Yashodhara, was taken away by Prince Siddhartha, and he thereafter looked upon Siddhartha as he would an enemy from a past existence. He was spurned by Siddhartha. This is the story, right, of Devadatta. This is why he was always jealous of Siddhartha. Even when Siddhartha, after 12 years of dedicated searching, finally attained enlightenment, Buddha-ness, and started to teach Buddha-ness, Devadatta thought, well, I should be the teacher of Buddha-ness. Who the hell are you who stole my wife or my woman, right? Again, remember, it's interesting, this two different understandings of women, but still the same kind of misogyny, right? It's property. That explains a lot about the situation with Devadatta. Why is Nichiren talking about all these? We've read this in the Lotus Sutra. Why is he picking them out so much? Why do you think he's picking them out so much? He's trying to indicate that the teacher of the Lotus Sutra, the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, the daimoku itself, the chanting, the recitation, the gongyo, also chanting. It's singing, isn't it? The recitation, it's all chanting. All of Buddhism was taught. Remember, it's an oral teaching to be memorized and repeated. Isn't that what we do with songs? It's all chanting, chanter. Kantas. Later, he broke his ties with his family and joined the Buddhist order, but when there were large gatherings of human and heavenly beings, the Buddha would censure him, calling him a fool or one who eats the spit of others. In addition, being a man who cared deeply about fame and personal profit, he envied the attention that was paid to the Buddha, to Shakyamuni Buddha. But now, did you catch that? Shakyamuni Buddha berated him. What? Shakyamuni Buddha said nasty things to somebody? Yes. Because, see, this is a leftover from our cultural upbringing of even though in all sorts of religions people do heinous things. And then, they either cover it by saying, well, if I apologize, I'm sorry, everything's okay. No, it's not. But anyway, there's this idea that Buddha is this glowing, sainted thing floating in the air. He's a man, just like you, or, well, man or he's a human, okay? And haven't we read many times that as a Buddhist, the responsibility is on us to correct other Buddhists who are not practicing correctly, doing things wrong, saying incorrect things, or harboring negative, egotistical, manipulative, right? The world of anger. And certainly as a relative of Shakyamuni's, and obviously he was dealing with Devadatta getting in his face all the time, right? Over a woman, and then over scholarship, and then over Buddhahood. Devadatta went and joined a Buddhist order. There wouldn't have been a Buddhist order had it not been for Shakyamuni achieving an awakening that he called Buddha. So yeah, it's important to understand that attaining enlightenment, being awakened, doesn't mean that we float on a cloud, that we're always perfect. In fact, part of perfection, look at the universe. The universe has many, many glorious sights, but it's also full of very violent actions and harsh environments, right? Even the space itself is really, really harsh, extremely cold, full of radiation. We have a very special, unique situation here on Earth for which we can grow this body to emancipate or to emerge a mind, right? That's outside of the context of time-space. That's stuff. That's samsara time-space. Our experience, it isn't anchored in time-space. It's an observer, participator, analyzer, influencer within the matrix of time-space. That's a whole other discussion, and it can get messy, so I don't want to get too involved in that. But understand that, yes, Shakyamuni Buddha had harsh words to say when they were appropriate, when they were needed. He then began observing the 5 ascetic practices in an attempt to appear more admirable than the Buddha. Well, there it is. You want to participate in the 5 ascetic practices to enhance the profundity of your understanding of the mind of enlightenment. Cool. If that's what you need to do, then do it. Right? But if you're doing it so the girls and the guys will see you as, wow, I don't know if Shakyamuni ever did that. Well, why would they know? They weren't around when Shakyamuni went through his arduous journey, yeah? But even so, Devadatta could claim, well, I'm better than Shakyamuni because, look, I've done this. It breaks my brain a little bit that all of these practices Devadatta undertook only existed to practice because of Shakyamuni. But this is always kind of tripped over in the stories, yeah? Like these other Buddhas somehow instructed Shakyamuni, or Shakyamuni was their servant. I understand expedient means, but get real. Buddhahood and Buddhaness and Buddhism is the construction and invention and discovery of Shakyamuni's enlightenment. Period. Anyway. He pounded iron to make a 1,000-spoked wheel pattern to imprint on the soles of his feet, gathered together fireflies to form a tuft of white hair between his eyebrows. I'll let you research that. And committed to memory 60,000 and 80,000 jeweled teachings. Yeah, Devadatta was foremost, often recognized as foremost among the scholars. In other words, those who had memorized, could recite on demand any sutra, any commentary you desired. He could recite it word for word, which was very handy when things started getting written down, transposed. Ananda, same thing, right? He erected, we're still talking about Devadatta, an ordination platform on Mount Gayashirya, and lured many of the Buddha's or Shakyamuni's disciples over to his side. He was starting his own sect. to compete, not just to have his own sect, but to compete with Shakyamuni. The arrogance of this is astounding, don't you think? He smeared poison on his fingernails and thus attempted to poison the feet of the Buddha. He beat the nun Utpalavarna to death and rolled a huge rock down on the Buddha, tried to kill him, injuring the latter on the toe. The Buddha, Shakyamuni, just barely got out of the way, and the boulder ran over his foot, right? He was guilty of committing 3 cardinal sins and, in the end, gathered about him all the evil men of the 5 regions of India and strove to harm Shakyamuni Buddha and his disciples and lay supporters. I mean, this is a Lifetime movie, right? A love triangle. Amazing what he was willing to do. Not conceiving, seeing the import of Shakyamuni reflected in all of the followers who followed him, students of his teachings, as a great man. The greater his teachings, the greater his following, Devadatta got more insulted and wanted to usurp Shakyamuni. I don't think he really thought about the teachings. He memorized them all, but he didn't really get it, did he? I mean, how could he have behaved that way if he did? Right? Attitude and intent. Attitude, intent. King Bimbisara was the foremost of the Buddha's lay supporters. Each day he dispatched 500 carriages, day after day, supplying alms to the Buddha and his disciples. But Devadatta, driven by his intense jealousy, talked to Prince Ajatashatru, and in time persuaded him to attack his father, whereupon he pinned the king down with 7-foot-long spikes. In the end, the earth in front of the northern gate of the capital of Rajagriha split open, and Devadatta fell into the great citadel of the Avicii hell. There was not a single being in the entire major world system who did not witness the event. So at that moment, Devadatta was seen for who he really was. He couldn't hide his jealousy, avarice, his angry state, his manipulations, all of his lies. He broke the spell of all those who would follow him. I went, oh man, we've been following the wrong idiot. Right? One would suppose that as a result, Devadatta would never be able to escape from the great citadel of hell of incessant suffering, which is just our day-to-day samsaric life, right? Because even though he knew all this Buddhist scripture, text, learning, he didn't know it in here. He didn't hold it in his heart. He didn't capture its profundity. He was just playing at Buddhism to advantage his position. And yet, amazing as it is, and admirable as well, in the Lotus Sutra he became a thus come one called Heavenly King. And if Devadatta could become a Buddha, then all the countless other evil people who were enticed by him, since they shared with him the same karmic cause and effect, must surely have been able to escape from the pains of the hell of incessant suffering. End quote. Or, I'm sorry, end of paragraph. This, Nichiren continues, is entirely due to the benefit, the rewards of the Lotus Sutra. Thus, Devadatta and all the countless persons who attended him can now dwell in the house of the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra in order to gain that protection, life condition. Yeah? What a comforting thought. To be a part of the Sangha sentiently rather than politically, right? His ego left outside, just like his shoes, so that his potential, maximum potential, could exist with all of ours. All right? Strength in numbers, if you will. Itai Doshin, yeah? The various bodhisattvas, who were as numerous as dust particles of the land, had advanced to the level of near perfect enlightenment, which means they had freed themselves of all but their fundamental darkness. When they were fortunate enough to encounter the thus come one Shakyamuni, they thought that they would be able to smash this great boulder of fundamental darkness. But in the first 40 and more years of his preaching life, Shakyamuni, the Lord of Teaching, said that while he could explain the causes of enlightenment, he could not explain its effects. Why do you think that is? Therefore, he did not make clear to them the benefits of perfect enlightenment. Hence, not a single one of them could advance to the stage of perfect enlightenment. This was contrary to their expectation, right? Because he hadn't yet taught them how to do it for themselves. How do you attain Buddhahood? For yourself. It's an internal, intimate practice. It's an individual practice. Nobody can hand it to you. Over 42 years of teachings, preparing for you to accept enlightenment. But who do you accept it from? No one else. Nowhere else. Your own effort. That's the only way to get there. And that way to get there is specific to you. So, of course, he could never tell them. It was for them to discover. But during the 8 years when he preached at Eagle Peak, the Buddha revealed the effects of the enlightenment, which are called the one vehicle of Buddhahood. All the bodhisattvas thus advanced to the stage of perfect enlightenment so that their enlightenment was equal to that of Shakyamuni, thus come one. Buddhaness. It was as though they had climbed to the very top of Mount Sumeru and could see in all four directions. All became bright and clear, as though the sun had appeared in the midst of a long night. Even if the Buddha had not instructed them to do so, could they have failed to resolve to spread the teachings of the Lotus Sutra or to take upon themselves the sufferings of its practitioners? Right? Once you know the answers to a great puzzle, don't you immediately feel the requirement to share it with others? The Bodhisattva way is born of, is irrepressible from attaining enlightenment. Therefore they made a vow, saying, quote, "We care nothing for our bodies or lives, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way," end quote. And, quote, "never begrudging our bodies or lives," end quote, or, quote, "we will preach this sutra far and wide," end quote. These are all quotes from the sutra. Yeah. Furthermore, Shakyamuni Buddha, who is like a kind father, Many Treasures Buddha, who is like a loving mother, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions, who had appeared in order to aid or add their testimony, and who are like affectionate parents, were assembled together so that it was as though the 2 moons had come together, or 2 suns had appeared side by side. This is how we feel when we make this great accomplishment of awakening. We feel supported. We feel like the universe, the effects of life, the engine of life, have just been waiting on us to get clear. And so we feel very supported, safe. At that time, the Buddha spoke 3 times in warning, saying, quote, "So I say to the great assembly, after I have passed into extinction, who can guard and uphold, read and recite this sutra? Now, in the presence of the Buddha, let him come forward and speak his vow." right? And the rain's coming back, and it's a perfect moment for me to end today's lecture, talk, video. I promise we'll get back into it. But as the rain gets pretty loud today, so I don't want to compete with it for volume for you to hear me. Makes it hard for you as well. So interesting, though, Nichiren's path in this, or Nichiren's disciples' path in this recording of Nichiren's doctrine on chanting, right? So keep all of that in mind. If you have questions, use the comments, please. If you're not sure of using the public form of the comments, email me directly, tlksylvain@gmail.com, right? I want to hear from you. I want the whole reason for this huge resource of videos, podcasts, documents on threefoldlotus.com, ebooks, print books, all of it, is to help you gain confidence and resolve in your practice. So if you have questions or doubts, let's talk about it, yeah? In the meantime, thank you for liking and subscribing. It's so important to the algorithms, to propagating these teachings. Patrons on Patreon, those of you who buy books or make donations through PayPal or Patreon, you guys are essential to keep this endeavor alive. Thank you. Thank you. Take care of your health, please. Keep your practice strong, and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Thanks again. Bye for now.